Chapter 14 discusses the language that is used in presentations, and in part 1 we will talk about oral style and speaking appropriately. Oral style refers to how one conveys messages through the spoken word. Now, a successful oral style tends to use short sentences and familiar language. If you use long sentences, it may be difficult for your audience to follow along. If you use language that is unfamiliar to them, you will also lose them or alienate them. You should also use plural personal pronouns. So when you want to move forward, you could say, let's discuss this topic. Let's move on to this chapter. Let's, they, we, those are all plural personal pronouns. It's also important to use descriptive words and phrases. Those descriptive words and phrases appeal to the ear in ways that sustain listener interest and help them retain that information. And a good oral style also incorporates clear macrostructural elements. What do I mean by that? In your introduction, for example, you will do a main point preview. So you've got a preview of the points coming. You'll have clear transition statements from one main point to another. You'll use signposts. This is the first subject. This is the second reason. This is the third. So all of those macrostructural elements help your audience follow along. Speaking appropriately, this is just using language that is appropriate for your audience. You need to do some research and understand who is in your audience so that you can adapt. You want to adapt to their knowledge level, any attitudes that they may already have about your topic, what their interests are. Verbal immediacy refers to language used to reduce the psychological distance between the speaker and the audience. You're trying to make a connection with your audience, and you need to use language that will help you, bridge the gap between audience and speaker. You really want to make that connection. Relevance, timeliness. You want to make sure that the audience knows how they can use the information you're sharing right now. Proximity has to do with the information in relation to the listener's personal space. Now, common ground refers to the background, the knowledge, the attitudes, and the experiences and philosophies that are shared. So to reach this common ground, use personal pronouns, ask rhetorical questions, and then draw on common experience to make that connection. Speaker credibility has to do with the confidence that the audience places in the truthfulness of you as the speaker. Linguistic sensitivity. You want to use generic language. You don't want to use words that apply to one co-culture group as if they apply to everybody. Be careful about non-parallel language. These are words that are changed because of the sex, race, or other group characteristics of an individual. Marking refers to the addition of mentioning someone's sex or race or age to a description when it's not necessary. For example, if you are talking about Mark the firefighter, he's a firefighter from Engine House 3. You don't need to say Mark the Asian firefighter from Engine House 3. There's no reason to put Asian in there. It doesn't add anything. Irrelevant association is when one emphasizes one person's relationship to another when doing so isn't necessary to make the point. Of course, do not use offensive humor and don't use any profanity or vulgar terms. Cultural diversity. Make sure that you understand the language rules of different cultures so that you don't say something that you think is perfectly fine, but someone in your audience could find offensive. If you do speak a second language, if you're not a native speaker of that second language, be very careful because phrases and concepts that you know from the United States may not transfer well to another culture. So just be aware and be careful. Okay, and that comes to the end of part 1 for chapter 14.